Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefuhl and welcome to the brand new Opel Corsa E. The first really noticeable characteristic here is what they call the compass line, and that's the crease in the bonnet that comes right through the middle and goes right into the logo here, that's then contrasted with these horizontal lines here. Those cut straight into these now standardly LED lights, and what's quite unusual for a vehicle in this class is you can now get them for the first time ever optionally as full matrix LEDs. So, is that worth spending the extra money on? Of course, Opel says yes, but what do you think? There are two key design features here just to let you know that it is the electric model, and I think those are worth pointing out. The first is these wheels. These are specially designed to be maximally efficient. They're 17 inches and they're as aerodynamic as it's possible to make them. The other, and it's even more subtle, is this small E badge right on the side. Well, let's talk about the design itself. I find this a really interesting statement. In a world where SUVs are becoming more and more predominant all the time, it's harder and harder to make the argument for small cars or lower cars in the traditional segments. Round at the back of the car, and it's always going to be a bit of a challenge for designers of small vehicles. Here you get the distinct impression that somebody said to them, go big or go home. So they went big. As you can see, the lower third of design here is absolutely visually massive. And as with the side, but even more accentuated, the top half, because of this contrasting color, almost disappears. So what you see is this massive wedge of bumper. And visually, that's kind of a neat trick. Usually, the rear entrance on the boot of a hatchback can often be very compromised in terms of space. Can make the car look a little bit mean and small. So in order to get round that, so your focus isn't on this small load area, this massive bumper down here really pulls your eye into the solidity of the car, making it seem a lot bigger than it actually is. Now, interestingly, we don't only have AC charging available, but if you have a look down below, there is a DC charging point as well. Now, if you're not familiar, AC is for the slower charging and the DC is for the fast charging that you're now being made aware is available all over the place. Now let's take a look at the interior and see what the car does for us. Well, first thing to mention is, of course, the key. It's a pretty standard affair, but it's nice in the hand, and I think you'd be perfectly happy with that. As we open the car door, I think the first two things that immediately occur to me are, one, I really like the matching of materials that have been used in this car. It is obviously a cheaper, smaller car, but they've used the materials to their best effect to not make it look or feel cheap. Now, I understand that the cost for the electric one doesn't make it a cheap vehicle, but you have to price compare at the price point of the internal combustion engine, given that that is still the largest segment that's going to be selling for this car, at least to start with. Manual controls here down the side for the seat make it a lot faster to access and just immediately put where you want it. Honestly, a lot of the time I think electric seats are completely wasted in smaller vehicles. They're really complicated. they're really slow and not responsive, and in a small car with different drivers, you need to be able to make those adjustments quickly. So, thumbs up for that from me. The seat itself, yes, it's really comfortable. Now, obviously, we won't find out about that properly till we take it out and have a drive. But I'm very happy with what's been achieved here. So often, small cars are ruined because everything's great about them except for the seat. This feels brilliantly supportive. The road position is very nice indeed. I'm 1.78 m or 5'10", but I do have a particularly long torso. And if you look at my head, there is oodles of space above it here. So you could be very comfortable in this car. I'm guessing anywhere up to about 6'3". So you can see we have massive wasted dead zones at either side. Now, whilst that makes total sense from an economic standpoint, and the more you go off campus in terms of making something that's original and that's unique to the car, the more expensive it gets. This clearly is a standard stock item screen that has been fitted to the car. It's just that Peugeot achieved so much with their new virtual cockpit. So when I look at this, I think, I don't know. But then maybe the software will delight me when I turn the car on. Let's do it and find out. And the answer is no, not particularly. It looks like an interface for an app rather than a driver's display. Now, although I can change the way that the information is displayed on there, there's not really a huge amount that I can do to change the display itself. It does give me lots of information, which in an electric car is obviously always useful. This just isn't what I'm used to interacting with in a car. So for my taste, that is a real no. Honestly, I would rather have kept the digital information on the infotainment and maybe even just have gone back to analog dials for the driver display. But that really is a taste thing. So if you disagree with me, please feel free to say so in the comments. I'm genuinely keen to hear your opinion. And here we can see how this has been much more naturally integrated into the design of the car. This feels intentional and as if it's supposed to be there, and I like this mixture of these traditional buttons featuring as well with this touchscreen. But I have to tell you, it's not the most responsive system, and when you actually get into using it, a lot of times you just wonder, why on a car of this age and type is this not more responsive? I might be being really, really unfair there, but as I said, I do have something that works really well to compare it to. I like the matte finish here. It feels tactile and it makes it much easier to navigate. It's also much more pleasing to be able to get some traction and not leave big greasy fingerprints all over your display. I can't say I'm as excited about this piano black, but at least they've used a good high gloss plastic that doesn't easily show up fingerprints. These drivers' features here are not the most intuitive to use. They don't feel as natural to the hand as many other manufacturers. It's not a particular sticking point. If you own this car, you'll use it day in, day out, which means you'll get used to this very quickly indeed. But in terms of its ability to wow you right off the bat, well, I think you're going to want to spend more time focusing on the drive and less focusing on how this interacts. It's a small car, yes, but can you still realistically fit human beings into the back of it? Well, okay, let's start with getting into the car. I have to say, because of that nice roofline and because of the design of the vehicle, getting in and out of the rear of this car is actually not that straightforward. As you can see, I've got a quite narrow aperture, and it wasn't the easiest, almost graceful way to get in. Now, why am I mentioning that? If you're thinking you might have to use this to transport people with any ability challenges around in, it's not the easiest thing in the world. I have really short legs, and as you can see, it's not the most easy car to get in and out of the back of. Now, I suspect that isn't remotely a problem for the vast majority of customers, because probably the majority of people sitting back here will be children, and for them, this is absolutely perfect. Now, if you need to transport adults, there are some nice design touches. Look at the way the back of this seat has been sculpted in order to provide me with the maximum amount of legroom I can possibly have. And you can really see what a smart piece of design that is. If I follow the shoulder line of this seat down, you can immediately see, without that really clever designing of the seat, I'm really not comfortable back here at all. Let's see if there's actually room to put anything in the back. Well, we are not making use of this boot space in order to store batteries because of the configuration of the batteries in here, and that means we have a nice ample amount of room, just the same as the internal combustion engines, around about 270 litres of load space or thereabout. Very standard, very basic. The only thing I think is a bit of an omission that they might have considered would have been a variable shelf here to give us something closer to even load height. I don't know if that will be an option or if that's something that can come later. So let's take the car out on the road and see how it feels. Well, the nice thing about the latest range of fully electric cars that are now finally coming up on the market is that they are capable of delivering something that their internal combustion engine colleagues simply can't. And that is more power and acceleration. And that delivers a 0 to 100 kilometers per hour acceleration of around about 8.1 seconds. Very nice indeed for a small car. The best that the internal combustion engine can deliver is about 8.7. So, pretty good job at getting a comparison. That engine's 130, this has a slightly more powerful output, but you really do feel that little extra bit of kick when it comes to driving around town or taking these out on the highway. This car comes equipped with 3 different driving modes. You can have standard, you can have eco, or you can have sport. What changes when you go through those modes? Well, theoretically, the steering becomes a little bit more responsive and agile. The power becomes a little bit more responsive as well, but they are keen to point out that if you put your foot down, even in eco mode, suddenly all of the power is instantly available to you. So if you want to drive the car at its most efficient, you can, but then if you need the power, it's there for when you need it. In day-to-day and everyday usage, what difference does it practically make? Well, if you change the driving modes, which I can do with this handy button just behind the gear shifter, I know I still call it that. If I change this now, we're currently in eco, let's put it in sport. The pedal mapping is definitely noticeably different. This is clearly where the most fun is going to be had driving this car. And the steering? Definitely more responsive. The fun factor of driving this just went up significantly. That's really pleasing. In terms of what that does to your efficiency, well, the stated efficiency for this vehicle with its 50 kilowatt battery is a range of 330 kilometers. Well, like all electric cars. Although it's a WLTP figure, which means it's much better than their stated figures used to be, there's still a little bit of wishful thinking in it. We currently have a range of 230 kilometers. We certainly haven't been driving around like crazy people, but we absolutely haven't done 100 kilometers of driving. So it's a realistic real-world usage. If you really want to have fun with this car, you're going to be able to expect a range of about 200. Bearing in mind, there's a lot of whistles and bells that can be switched off. If you want to drive it at its most efficient, you can do a lot better. So I would imagine a standard customer for this car is going to spend most of their time in eco and then just flip it on to sport when they really want to enjoy it. There are 2 recuperation modes. Well, D is the standard, and if you have it in D, then you will get a recuperation load, and that's regenerating power from braking that delivers you the maximum amount of driving pleasure, so it should be most familiar in regular car usage. If you push the back on the gear selector, you will change your driving modes to the next one down, and when you're in B, the recuperation is maximized. So you can recognize that. If I give the car a little bit of a boost here and then let go, the deceleration rate, which is the rate at which the car is recuperating energy, has more or less doubled. I think this car is absolutely great. It gives me as much pleasure to say that as it did when I tried the electric 208. But, and I have to be completely honest here, when I drove the electric 208, I felt like I was sitting in a bit of the future. When I drive this car, and I don't concern myself with anything other than the drive. I feel exactly the same way. It handles great. I like the styling. I think they've kept a huge amount of Opel characteristics in it overall, but made it look young, funky, fresh, dynamic. You'd be perfectly happy to pull up with this car anywhere. And I also like the fact that it sits on the same platform, the same level, the same way as the other cars within its sector. I think that's a big, bold step forwards. But, and for me, it is a significant but, I think that the way that the technology has been integrated into the driver experience really still needs some work. There are some huge step forwards in this car and this platform overall. To me, the ergonomic driver experience definitely still needs more updating. Now, as more data comes in and more refreshes are possible, and hopefully as battery production gets cheaper, that should all be around the corner, but that's not going to happen next week. This car is what's coming next week or thereabouts, as you understand. And because of that, I would have liked to have seen something just a little bit more challenging, modern and innovative in terms of design. But that is very much my taste. Other people might be screaming at their screen right now, I love it! And please do tell us if you're one of those people. So design great, drive fantastic, driver experience, seating position, excellent. Technology integration, I think could maybe use a bit more work. But overall, if this is a glimpse of the future, then the future looks bright. Orange, it turns out. If you have any questions or comments, please pop them below. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope we'll see you all again soon.